The Federation for American Immigration Reform, a D.C.-based group pushing for less illegal immigration, has filed lawsuits against the LAPD, LA Sheriff's Department, and California Highway Patrol. The suits are part of an effort to find the funding behind this summer's anti-ICE riots in the city. The group is demanding these agencies comply with their requests for public records related to their actions and involvement in the violent riots, which ended up costing taxpayers more than $30 million and resulted in hundreds of arrests. Speaking of finding answers, President Trump and his administration have vowed to use the full weight of the federal government to bring down domestic terrorist group Antifa. Their latest strategy is just to follow the money. The administration pledging to go after Antifa's finances, and those operations are already well underway. The National News Desk's Jeff Harris has more.
Along with the Trump administration, multiple research groups are actively working to track down who's funding Antifa, both at the individual and organizational level. I'm told part of that research starts with following the money trail. Peter Schweizer, president of the Government Accountability Institute, tells us many activist groups are linked to nonprofit organizations with tax-exempt status, oftentimes getting money by large grant-giving foundations.
So they're required to disclose to the IRS in something called a 990 form, so you can trace a lot of the money that way.
In other cases, Schweizer says, you can also find people bragging about the support they've offered and given to certain groups.
The information that comes out is not always a complete picture, but I think it's a pretty good indicator of who the money is coming from and who is receiving the money and what they're using it for.
At President Trump's Antifa roundtable last week, Schweizer's colleague Seamus Bruner sharing with the administration what they've found so far, pointing to GAI investigations showing coordination across cities like Portland and Seattle involving people who were paid to participate in the Unrest, naming some major funding sources like George Soros' Open Society foundations.
The Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network.
The Capitol Research Center, another group researching Antifa. President Scott Walter telling us part of it is understanding the landscape. For example, the National Lawyers Guild, who he says is the legal auxiliary for Antifa, showing up anytime there's a protest turned riot.
That's so that the National Lawyers Guild lawyers can both try to keep the police away from activists or intimidate the police.
Walter adding in one of the center's recent reports, revealing how organizations in the homeless policy space are aligned with radical and extremist worldviews. They found a group called the Western Regional Advocacy Project, who gets funding from the Tides Network.
Quite a number of folks who seem to be very comfortable with the idea of violence, let's put it that way, receive serious Tides funding.
Now, both Schweizer and Walter also say they look for specific code words or phrases typically used on the left to describe violence or, at a minimum, aggressive protesting. One of those phrases is direct action. I'm Jeff Harris.